everyone. Welcome to Achieving Success with Olivia Atkin. I am your host, Olivia Atkin. Each week, we will discuss the roadmap of achieving your personal and professional success. We give you real-life stories on growing personally and professionally to achieve your life and career goals with the help of some top-notch guests. Today, we are speaking with Eric Rush. Eric Rush is the founder of Prime Pitch Podcast Network, a company dedicated to empowering voices and creating transformative connections through storytelling. A decorated military veteran and an award-winning podcaster, Eric produces 3 influential shows: Unfinished Business, supporting veterans as they navigate life after service, and Next Level Thinkers, celebrating innovative thought leaders, and the Rush Outer Perspective, which explores the art of living through empathy and growth. Drawing from his own journey of overcoming challenges and embracing reinnovation, Eric blends his expertise in communications and learning technologies to help individuals and brands connect authentically with their audiences. His work amplifies the power of tuning adversity into purpose and inspiring transformative change. You can find Eric on LinkedIn by searching Eric Rush or by going to his website, primepitchpodcast.com. Hello, Eric. It's fantastic having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Thank you so much. I'm super excited. This is actually the very first podcast I've ever done. So, the pressure's on from my end to do well. No, it is the very first podcast I've been on ever. So I feel very blessed to be spending time with you on achieving success. And I'm looking forward to having an amazing conversation with you today.
Well, it's also such an honor that I get to be the first host that now you're on the reverse side of things on. So
100%. No, it's
so
great.
I take that as like, I got to make sure, I give you the right carpet experience here. But to start off the show, can you tell me what success means and looks like to Eric Rush?
Well, success to me is something that is when you're pursuing your passion and your dreams and your aspirations, your life mission. I think it's so important to align yourself with what you firmly believe in, and that you're heading down a trajectory that's going to give you personal fulfillment. And if you do it long enough and hard enough and strong enough, and with the right spirit and the right energy and the right mental attitude and fortitude, it'll bring you the financial freedom for sure.
And I love how you bring up, and I think it's so important to emphasize the point you just made of like, what drives you and where do you want to stand tall in the mud, right? When you're in the thick of things, can you look yourself in the mirror? And if not, how can you pivot and take the things that when you felt the proudest or felt the most yourself, can you go into that next area? And that being said, too, you've had quite a few different points in your life and different experiences that have shaped not just starting Prime Pitch Podcast Network, but even the podcast, the diversification in your podcast portfolio. You can see through your shows the different areas you're passionate about and where your focus lays on leading and sharing stories and giving a voice to those communities. So I want to kind of go back to that journey with you. And one thing I mentioned in your intro, and again, going back to the kind of podcast you have a military veteran podcast as well. What inspired you to join the military, and what were you hoping to gain or contribute through that experience?
Okay, well, the interesting thing is that I always say go back to childhood. It's like I what I've learned through my experience in the military is there's a lot of individuals that join the military because they're trying to escape something going on in their home, and for me that was the case. I always say that I wasn't nurtured. I was in a survival training program. So for me it was my parents were really much too young to have children. They were teenagers themselves, and and unfortunately their relationship was forged in conflict, and so was I was forged in conflict. There was no nurturing when the need to provide outweighed the need to parent. So I went through that journey all the way to my teens. And when I started getting to an age where I could find a way to have structure, to have a father figure, and because my mother was a single parent. Um, but so once I got to looking for structure, looking for a father figure, but then looking to advance my education, I realized that maybe the military would be the best resource to do that. And I believe that there are a lot of individuals that have that same experience, that are really trying to get out of um, you know their community, their the projects, and trying to make something of themselves. And that was something that inspired me to get in, for sure.
And one thing you mentioned, and I don't know if I'm going to say the wording right, but you were in that combat zone growing up. That environment where you were training. You didn't know what you were training for at the time. You're going through your day-to-day life, but that analogy used in what you were just saying of like that was a training, an environment, a zone, and how you related it to the military. Once you had that perspective of serving and seeing some similarities, or oh wait, this kind of prepped me, and that environment prepped me for how to deal with this, good, bad, or indifferent. And how was like that reflection for you, and how did that kind of shape your perspectives of experiences?
It's so interesting because it wasn't just it this happened this epiphany happened to me just a few days ago. Okay, now check this out. Like, honestly, I would say I was fortunate. I didn't have a childhood. I was in survival training program, in a survival training program. That in essence doesn't really mean that I had strong mental, physical, emotional fortitude or spiritual fortitude to handle the next decision, which is to join the military. In fact, like I said, just recently, I just had this reflective moment where I was thinking about how like how unprepared I was for combat conflict, and the mental, spiritual, psychological, and sociological experience of going to combat. So for me, I would say that um, yeah, I had a choice, right? I had a choice to, like, well, I didn't have the essential tools, the emotional guidance system, emotional guidance system to navigate it in life as a child to in my teenage years, to make the decision to be strong and resilient enough to join the military. Yes, I was brave and strong to make the decision on my own without my family even knowing. I went to the filled out the paperwork, got my testing done, and then there's like, what, you doing what? And I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. Like, I mean, but that doesn't mean I was mentally, emotionally, and spiritually prepared to handle the type of adversity and conflict that I was about to face. And in fact, I would say that in many ways it made me harder, it made me like more angry and more like, let's go, like, light the fuse, like pull the pin on the hand grenade and hold it until it's time to throw. Well, part of me never threw that hand grenade, so the grenade, you know, exploded, and all the shrapnel hit me from being deployed and not being really strong enough to cope with it. I would just say that I think a lot of um, kids, or the guys that join the military, or women that join the military, they kind of have that similar experience where they're going into a place, especially if you're like you show, especially like many combat veterans, you go through basic training and AIT or whatever you do, and all of a sudden you're thrust into combat, in a combat situation, without even being like, hey, well, I'm just trying to get used to being here, being in the military. You finish schooling, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of the desert. I'm driving a tank. So for me, I would say that was my biggest that was my experience in it. It was like, was I really mentally, physically, emotionally mature enough to handle it? Because the maturity level of emotional maturity to handle this kind of stress is so important. And like I said, I just had that epiphany. It's like, man, I guess I really was, I wasn't really as equipped as I to be that, even though I had the upbringing that I had.
And relating it to something else, it's when a lot of us face challenges or that new chapter, new beginning, I was recently talking about this with someone as a spouse of someone who serves in a military branch. Um, I never thought I would date someone who was in a military branch. And so being a part of that community and joining it, I don't wanna say later in life, I'm only 30, I'm not like but, I built a business, I built all these things, and I thought I had the structure and, knew what to expect, and, like, I could go into anything, like, if I could do this, I could do that, and when you go into even as a spouse, and relating it from my perspective, when all of a sudden you have to move for the first time, or all of a sudden your spouse goes on leave or gets that emergency call that, like, we just actually had that today where it was like, oh, after I record with Eric, like, this is our plans for the day. And then it was, oh no, I gotta go in. Like, I'm like, okay, how are we pivoting? What are we doing? Like, what support do you need? What should, all these different things mentally until you're in it. There's no navigating it. And I've found, whether it's talking to people who've served and have gotten out and are veterans, people who are serving, or the spouses and family that serve them, until you're in it, there's no preparation. You could go through boot camp, you can be told what to kind of expect. Till you're in it, there's no real direction with it. But also, if you don't highlight the moments you're struggling, or how do I navigate this, that's when in the back end, that little shadow, the monster, whatever you want to call it, is gonna pop out. So it's okay to have, like I was telling this one spouse, it's okay if you don't like it here. Or, it's not what you're used to because you just got here, this and that. But, like, in those moments, you need to say something, and we can help you through that. But if you don't, it can come out tenfold, and these realizations down the line can happen where you're like, "Wait, what? What was that?"
Yeah, that's the thing, like I would say, like, having coping mechanisms in place that you hope that you're gonna have in life, right? Is that I think that's the biggest part is that, like, I have a friend, his name's John Wayne Walden. He was the first amputee um amputee to become a Green Beret. And he lost his leg in the middle of a war, and then he went back and finished sniper school and became a Green Beret sniper with the first amputee to become a Green Beret sniper. And and I was listening. I remember reflecting on his story, and that was part of my epiphany. This I was thinking about his upbringing, and his parents were incarcerated when he was young, but he got adopted by his grandfather, and his story resonates so well because what he had to go through is he said all he talked about was his grandfather in this podcast of mine, and he talked about how he cared for him and loved him. And I just think that caring and loving and that nurturing kind of helps you navigate through this rough terrain. And if you don't have that, and if you don't have that kind of nurturing, it's a little difficult because you don't know how to cope. And in fact, I would say, in being raised in the environment I would say you struggle with identity issues. Especially if they're divorced when I was 5, and identity problems. Trying to figure out my emotional instability or whatever I was going through at that time. It was like, and it was like, okay, like, man, like, looking at it as I really wasn't nurtured to handle that kind of stress, or champion adversity in a certain way. So I think that's the thing I speak to, and it's kind of interesting because I don't know many people, and if you asked me when I was there, I probably would have said, I'm tough as nails, when I because I had that front, but when stuff started crumbling down in my life, I realized that, hey, maybe I wasn't all quite ready for this experience kind of thing. And I don't think many people will admit that. I don't know. Maybe many do, I guess, in many ways. But it's one of those things you reflect back and go, okay, give yourself a little grace. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I want to talk about, your transition into civilian life. But before we do that, based on something you had just mentioned, what is it like for you now, having these moments of epiphany or
Yeah.
reflection and going, oh, wait, like, this, that, the next happened, and it's not till this moment can piece all these together. What is that for you, like, going through and then being able to put the pieces together and that feeling of realization for you too?
For right now, it's like it's kind of inspiring, to be honest with you. Um, I would say like you look at it and you go, man, you've gone through this, you've gone through every stage you could possibly go through. But it's inspiring for me to look back and go, to see the power and the resilience and determination that got me through some rough patches where either they were combat related or post military, and then transitioning from that to having my own struggles with substance use and the downfall of my life in that part. But looking at it now, it's like you reflect back and you go, man, one of my friends, I remember I had him afterwards. He says something like, man, I thought, he made this comment like, I thought you were a badass, like in it was kind of like off camera. And I was like, well, I mean, I think I kind of am if I've been through what I've been through and come out at the neck of the woods and I'm interviewing you today. You're not interviewing me, like I'm a you, you're a lieutenant colonel, former lieutenant colonel, So it's kind of one of those things I go, well, maybe I'm kind of am a badass in some way, but in a humble way, humble warrior kind of thing. But I would say I'm proud of myself for overcoming the things have overcome for sure.
That being said, too, what was the transition like for you, transitioning from military to civilian life? And also, was there a defining moment or reason you decided to transition out of serving into civilian life?
Yeah, for me, it was I just got emotionally and physically exhausted and was stressed out. I have a picture of me where you could see my eyes were drippy, dreary, and it's a very like my body language in the photo is just like you could see the face of exhaustion in my eyes, and I think a lot had to do with it. I had got married before I got deployed, and that stress of caring and loving my wife, and then being deployed, it was just like it started to it was exacerbating itself when I started hearing stories of military personnel, their wives leaving them, stealing all their money, and having someone living in their house with some other man, and all these all these awful stories about um, someone in their most vulnerable state and being in the war is being taken advantage of. So that little thing triggered me, and I was not trustful while I was deployed. I was not. I wasn't at peace. But transitioning out, I brought that kind of I brought that fractured the things that were fractured in me back home, and the transition back was not very healthy for me. I was divorced within 3 months, and my wife said, I don't even know who you are, like, and I didn't even know who I was. Honestly, I felt very disoriented. It was like every room was a battlefield for me. I felt like the hypervigilance was taking over, and then I turned to coping mechanisms that ended up to my downfall, and ended me. Well, and I started getting DUIs and just going down that trajectory, and then I decided to try to intervene in God's plan in my life and try to take my life, and I think that was one of those moments where I realized, like, I had built so much momentum going down, like just from the epic collapse of my life, that I just said, man, I don't think I need to be here anymore. Ended up ended up taking a bunch of gel caplets and tried to commit suicide, and woke up in the hospital, and I realized that, like, there was a man across from me. This was a true. I haven't told this story before. There was a man across from me, an old man, and I was locked up. I was handcuffed to a gurney, and um they were putting a feeding tube in him, and I was there, like, hadn't just OD'd, and they were trying to feed him, and I'm here, this 27-year-old guy, kid, man, like healthy and strong, and here I am, like, intervening in God's plan for my life. And I just remember feeling so awful about that. And when I went to the mirror, I don't, this is going to be a little bit more graphic than probably, but I had, when you attempt the way I did, I had busted every blood vessel in my face, on my eyes, everything was purple, and just from the neck up. And when I looked at myself, I knew that I had did something evil. Like I had let I had did something evil to myself. And I actually thought, because I hadn't even seen myself, I was in the hospital for 4 days, 5 days. I hadn't seen myself. And I looked in the, then I went to the restroom, looked in the mirror, and I saw my face, and it was just like my eyes fluttered. I was scared. And I knew I had made, that I had done something evil to myself. And I said, if I live with this appearance, if I live with this, it's, I deserve it because I intervened in God's plan for my life. And then from that point on, I think that was the first part where I realized like I had intervened in a plan that was greater than me. And who was I to think, while this older gentleman's trying to fight to survive, I'm trying to end my life, you know? So it just didn't make a lot of sense.
And I appreciate you sharing that story. And it just shows how, even at some of our lowest moments, we can pick ourselves up and go, okay, I need to change this, or I want to change this, and have those moments of clarity of like what could be and what should be my next step. And I think going off of that as well, having that realization, but obviously struggle beforehand, also transitioning and everything. If someone was listening right now who might be struggling and might not be reaching out to friends or family, or knowing even how to communicate or have that moment of realization of like, I am struggling yet, what would be your piece of advice or like thing to think about based on your situation, that you would say, if you're like, don't try to commit suicide, or if you're thinking that like, here's what it was like once I got over, or got through, I should say, that battle.
First thing I would say is, um, just because you have, I would say, just because you try to attempt suicide doesn't mean you will succeed. And you might, you might even compound the situation. You might lose your eyesight, but because of your attempt, you might lose your the repercussions might be greater than the decision you make. So that would be the first thing, is to probably invoke some kind of fear in some way and say, how do you know you're going to be successful? And if you're not successful, are you willing to face the consequences of something greater happening to you by having trying to do that to you? Number one, I always thought that silent toughness was being silent, and and I was wrong, and but tell somebody what's going on. Reach out to somebody, if you feel like nobody's listening, then I'd say keep on reaching. You're not reaching the right people. You don't have the right people around you too that are willing to listen. Um, and number three, go seek some professional help for sure. I think there are a lot of people that aren't qualified to give you the kind of advice you wanted to. And I'll give you a scenario. Like when I wanted to talk, when I knew I was about to make that decision, I called my father. God rest his soul. He's a great man. I love him. But this one decision was not the best. He said, "Come meet me at a bar. Come meet me at this bar." And and so I said, "Okay, Dad." And I said, "I'm just tired, Dad." And I ended up getting drunk. And I think that helped me fueled my decision to go down to take the next step. So it wasn't the best decision to listen. So to find the right people to listen to you, and to surround yourself with the right people.
One thing I also recently listened to, and it was very interesting, and I was like, any one of us could be doing this every single day with our friends. There's two things. One is I do have 8 minutes. So typically, on average, if you're feeling low, it takes an 8-minute text conversation or phone conversation with someone in that moment of time can give you a very different perspective and get you out of that place. So the person I was listening to used this example of like, we're all very busy, especially entrepreneurs, first responders, military personnel. All of us have so many things going on in our life in one moment in time that we could think we're being the best person and showing up for everyone the way everyone needs to be shown up. But that's not always the case. And if one person, if I text you every single week, I'm just going, hey, hey, and like you're busy and get back to me. And there's this one week I'm going through something and I just say, hey, like, what's up? And you're like, okay, I could get to this later. It's a normal rhythm, but I might need you in that. So what they came up with is like this text of just saying to your friends or people, do you have 8 minutes to know, okay, I need those 8 minutes, it's, and then we can push through it and it will give me clarity. And the other thing was doing a once a week, like in a group text, especially if you have group texts, of giving everyone like a quick audio message or something, whatever you guys want, of like, this is what's going on in my life. This is what's new. This is what's exciting. I'm struggling with. And a quick, like, hey, this is what's going on. So that you people can hear the tone inflections, people can like hear your voice, but also make sure you are touching base with your network, your community, and the people who do care about you. Because, like, sometimes myself, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna text this person, and then time differences and this and that. I'm like, okay, I'll get to it tomorrow. Tomorrow turns into next week, and then you're like, next week, like, oh wait, it's been a week or two.
Yeah. No, it's true. Like, I like that 8 minute rule. I'll try to focus on that for sure. Put at that as one of my tools in my toolbox for sure. Cause I think, there are times where you have to listen, like I recall a gentleman I knew in Southern California, who said, man, hey, maybe he just kind of said it on the flu. I hadn't really talked to him very much. Didn't know him very well. His name was Scott. And he said, hey, we should get together and talk sometime. And then maybe about a month later he took his life. And I just remember he would told me that at the gym. We never talked before. We didn't have that association, which I thought was kind of weird for him to say. But then it was that one moment where he said that I didn't say, hey, well, let's meet tomorrow, or let's go have some coffee tomorrow or something, and but of course I don't, you don't know it at that time, but it's just something you have to, those little cues, like, hey, we should get together and have lunch sometime. It could be that one moment that you say yes, that you turn that person's life around.
And I remember there's one instance, and you sharing that story made me think about it because I haven't thought about it in a really long time. I used to work for a sport and social club when I was living in Jersey in college. And as the only female who worked for the company and going out to all the rec sports for adults, the guys, like, I built really good relationships with our customers, which was great. And I remember, I'm talking to some of the guys that are asking me questions. This one person, I'm not gonna name his name, like, we're texting, he has a wife, and it's just like regular chat. Like, I become friends with that whole group, so it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And they're big jokesters and they mess around and this and that. And one night we're texting and he's like, I'm just gonna cut myself. And like using that, like, said something about getting a knife and just hurting himself. And I was like, do you want to like jump on a phone call? Like, you want to meet up and like this and that? And he's like, he caught himself and he's like, oh no, I'm joking. And I'm like, are you? Like, let's just go and get dinner and this and that. And he was like, no, I don't need it. And I call like one of his other friends up and I'm like, hey, he's telling me no, and like he doesn't need this and it was a joke. You're way closer to him. I need you to like actually gauge this right now and see like where he stands and be there for him. Come to find out, like, I was the only person he expressed that to. And it was that moment of like, I guess, feeling comfortable enough and being in the pace he was, where he was just like, I'm gonna say it and kind of go from there. And it was like when that came out, and luckily he then ended up, getting therapy and working through what was going on. His wife was very upset of, well, why are you talking to him? Why did he tell you that? Like this and that. And I'm like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
there might be something he's protecting you from, or he doesn't know how to navigate. But like now you need to support. It doesn't matter. And in those moments of opportunity, I think it's important that no matter who they're confiding in or where you are, like acknowledge those cues, just like you said, because the worst thing any of us could do is live with regret
Yeah.
and the what ifs. And that can be the biggest enemy of all, even over ourselves sometimes, is that power of regret. And we don't know how it might come, the waves it might come in. But also, I'm in saying that, I also mean like we all go through struggles. No one's perfect, and we all have mountains to climb, and there's always that new mountain to climb. So, as you said earlier, you have to give yourself grace and understanding, but also know like it, even in those tough moments, how will it potentially build me up to be stronger, to be better, to use it in different ways? And that being said, you have done that. You have taken your past experiences, whether it's childhood and how it shaped your decision to go and serve our country, and take the decisions of going to serve your country and taking them even with your struggles through transitioning into civilian life and in civilian life to now help others. So you have chosen one of your avenues to use storytelling as a transformative tool, both personally and professionally. How do you see the act of sharing stories as a way to heal yourself and others, inspire others, but also connect to say, I hear you, I see you, I've been there, and let we could push through this together.
Yeah, well, it starts. The biggest part is for me is like starting from like like I would say I would say first I have to say, well, you don't know what you don't know. For me, that was the first thing I had to come to the realization is that, but I want to know what I don't know. So it started with me having that interest of like saying, I don't know what I don't know. I don't even know who I am right now. After post military, and then obviously being incarcerated through a whole another level of that, right? And then, but then after I got out, it was just like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know anything right about myself, and where am I going to go from here? So I had this keen interest of like just saying, you know what, I got to get out there and figure out what I don't know, and I'm gonna put myself in front of the right people that are gonna give me the show me who they are, and how to think differently. So that was what inspired me to get into podcasting in the first place. So that I could be, small still voice of God said, shut up and listen. Just shut up and listen. It's not about you. It is about you, but you need to shut up and listen. So I should have a shut up and listen podcast. That's what I should name it. But after you I started doing that, and then I started realizing that people, as they were speaking, they were holding a mirror to me, to my face. They were just showing, this is, you hear something and something resonates with you, and then you're like, oh my God, something's resonating with me, with their message. And I would sit there and go, oh, whoa, I just got something that really spoke to me about my life. And and so I think from that, it's just realizing that number one, the level of humanity is really important. It's like is understanding and that people have adversity that they've gone through and experienced in their life, and that you're that I'm no different than anybody else that experiences severe trauma, and experience a really hard block, because there are people that have had even harder experiences in life than I have. So for me is to understand that I always say it's a difference between empathy and cognitive empathy. And cognitive empathy alone is like an emotional trap. It's just based on feelings, and you have to and it's a feelings creation, and this whole thing. Cognitive empathy is the ability to understand how someone could get to a place to feel the way they do. And with that, I consider myself kind of a super empath, I guess, now, having had these life experiences where I've seen I've seen the best, the worst in the best people, and the best in the worst people, so that you would consider from inmates to executives, and businesses. So for me, the ability to push people forward and listen to who they are and what they're achieving. It's not only just about it's I learn, grow, and transform is my motto with this whole experience. Learn, grow, and transform. And um, and I think as I offer the platform for other people to come on my podcast, I think they learn, grow, and transform. But when they go back home and they go listen to themselves and they hear their sound bites and they like get empowered. I've seen it so many times. I had this ex-football NFL football player that the pandemic ruined his career. He had all these scouting appointments. He had got injured, and then he had all these scouting. He played for the Dallas Cowboys, got hurt, and then he was rehabilitated. He was fully rehabilitated. Then he had all these scouting things ready for him to come, scouts to come look at him. Pandemic hit, they shut it down and ruined his career. And I got him on that podcast. And when we started sharing his story, he was surprised that I wanted to interview him. It was the first time he ever done a podcast. And when I sat down and listened to his story, when he went back and listened to it, now he's a motivational speaker and he's a head coach at one of the high schools around here. And for me, it's like owning what you know is so important now, like for me. And that's what I didn't know what I didn't know. I know what I don't know, and then I do. Now I know what I know, and then do I own what I know? So I'm getting to that place now. Am I owning what I know? So I think this is our conversation. So I'm gonna go back and look at it. I guess I do own this. No, but
Well, it's also something I want to touch on two things you highlighted in what you were just saying right now. One, I think it's so important, and I've gained this in the different industries I have worked, and it was more of a past like year realization for me. Of when you get to a point where you're comfortable with what you're doing, you're all in, you thrive on it, this and that, whether it's personally and professionally, you get to a point where it just hits you of like, I'm not wearing these masks anymore.
yeah,
And for me, I pride myself on always being very transparent. I sometimes have that locker room. I joke it's the locker room mouth. From working in professional sports for so long, I some people say it's a sailor's mouth. I'm like, you are getting my organic self. But what I didn't realize is even though I was shining that light on how I talk, how I connect with so many people, this and that, there were aspects of what I was doing where I felt like I couldn't fully be myself in certain spaces. I had to present myself a certain way. And it wasn't until I moved to Alaska and working from home for so long and having the podcast, having the business, I always say there's a difference when you're an entrepreneur as well as like when you do work from home and you're not seeing as many people all the time and this and that, it takes a toll on you. So
Mhm.
when I started doing activities, outdoor activities, meeting different people, I was like, this is going to be so draining. I'm not comfortable with this. Like, I am an extrovert, but over time, that's kind of worn down. And I one day we like went all day, like it was a 14-hour day. And my boyfriend looks at me, he's like, we were go, go, go doing activities with everyone. And you're like in the mix of it. You're having a good time. You're like making everyone feel so comfortable. I was like, yeah, it was fun. He's like, you're telling me you're not comfortable with this? And I'm like, honestly, I feel like that was one of the first times that in that environment, I was like, I'm just going to completely be myself, make the jokes I want to make, this and that. And I was like, I was me again. I didn't have to wear that. So I think sometimes we all put these masks on, not even knowing that we're putting that mask on. And it's not until something hits or the conversation has, you're like, oh, I could take it off and I could be myself and I will be validated. I will be heard and it will be way more powerful and impactful for you and other people. Um,
yeah, yeah. No,
and
it's
I,
go ahead.
no, no, you go, you go.
No, no, I agree. Like, I call people say, for a while people say, we got to take this armor off of you, like God wants you to take this armor off of you and be vulnerable. So for me, like, it's true, like wearing a mask of yeah, shame, guilt, doubt, anger, regret, all the things we mentioned is these different masks that I had put on, like just, but it was, I made it a stoic mask where it was non-emotional, non-expressiveness, very ultra serious. Because I did have an ultra serious life. I did have a very serious, things happen, so but I had lost a piece of my identity too, through all those experiences. Because what I really admired about my father, was that he had this playful, joyful nature. And prior to the military, once I was deployed, it was like I turned that off and it never came back. And now I'm seeing now I'm seeing it resurface. Like I'm seeing the natural self, the inner self come out and really shine a light. So yeah, I agree with you 100% about taking off the mask. I'm still getting better at that, and it's a different version of me. But I feel very fortunate and blessed to be able to socialize. And the truth is some of these podcasts, like I never even had an intention of, I never wanted to do anything with veterans, anything, honestly. Like, and it wasn't until I started, I was part of one of the originating founders for this veterans appreciation event that's a former Secret Service guy asked me to be involved in, and I helped. I was the originator of creating that, helped the co-creator for the organization. It's real big here in Frisco, and the whole time I remember going to an event, I was sitting there interviewing people, I was sweating, like I was just like, I mean, it was a nightmare. And now I host a podcast for veterans pursuing new life missions. So for me, it's like, dude, God, God doesn't want, He's going to give you what you need, not what you want. And so I'm always, it's one of those expansive. Yeah, I'm expanding because of it, and it's making me. I just gave a award, a a Veteran of the Year award on behalf of Prime Pitch Podcast Network to a veteran here that's been making dynamic impacts, and that was really cool. So
For for you, as you continue to build Prime Pitch Podcast Network, what is your vision for the future, and how do you hope your work will impact the community and people you serve through the network as hosts, as guests, as listeners, the whole gamut?
well, for me, from a personal perspective, I hope that people will see, that I leave a legacy of someone that was willing to listen to them, to listen to their story, and elevate them and promote their life passion, their life's passion, their mission, and what makes them happy and fulfilled in whatever cause they're pursuing. So for me, that's one. And number two is to do it long enough to where some financial there's to reap the rewards of my hard work through helping other people design their own podcast. So Prime Pitch Podcast Network is a curation company, a curating podcast curating organization that is work focuses on building niche specific podcasts. So and so for that, I had to see if I could do it myself first, and apparently I've been able to accomplish that. So and being part of podcast now, being in podcast, with you today is like, okay, man, now you can go out there and do some podcasts. So yeah, so now I'm like, you got to get the full scope of being if you're going to be a premier podcaster, you need to be able to be a guest as well. So I'm really excited, and I'm very fortunate to live in a type of community that supports so that supports my endeavors here. And yeah, so we're looking to keep on building and have a curation team. And about, I think some you said about, like, you reach a point when you're stagnant. And but I just bought this, get it out. I just bought uh this $6,000 camera. And I don't know anything how to use it. So I'm like, okay, well, this you're gonna do a major upgrade. You're gonna have some learning to do today. So that's it. But no, you got to keep on expanding. Yeah.
And that being said, talking about expansion, if someone wants to be a part of your network, whether it is as a host or someone who can support it or wants to be a guest, once they find the network, what are ways other people can be a part of your network?
Well, they can, I mean, definitely can visit me on my site and leave me a message there. It's primepitchpodcast.com. I would say just send me your bio, send me your information. what your heart's desire is. If you want to host podcasts, that's a thing. Getting people to host. That's my next mission is to get individuals to host the podcast that I host and take over and continue to curate podcasts. So that's the primary that's the primary way through podcasting through my website for sure.
That's amazing. And as you know, and I would love to also get your perspective on it. I think there's such a community and empowerment, whether you're on either side, a guest or a host, but it also gives you a form to do that additional impact because you nor I will know how this might affect this episode itself might affect someone today or in 6 months from now when they're listening to it. It could be the conversation we had around suicide. It could be the conversation we had around transitioning to civilian life. It could be a spouse listening that now can understand her spouse better and what they're going through to have those conversations. It could be someone who wants to, get to know the podcasting space a little bit more. We never know how it could impact someone, but seeing that happen and know what's happening
Yeah.
through giving that experience can be so impactful.
Yeah, I think the biggest part of that too is just owning your story, like that's where I'm at right now is owning my story, right? Because I think when you get on a podcast and you're a part of a podcast and you like I am today, it's like, do you own your story? Like, are you owning your story and you're saying, get behind this adversity, I'm actually doing my first speaking engagement in February 18th. It's called The Sinking Ship. And it's all about like how I was a captain of a sinking ship most of my life. And little by little holes started appearing and the ship started um, capsizing and going down the water, and I was underneath, I was below, I was at rock bottom, and there was the treasure on rock bottom for me to grab and come up with a handful of gold. And but I think owning your story, even if it's just getting that one guest to own their story, then it's the audience of one, right? It's an audience of one. If you pack that one person that one time at the right place or right time with the right words, and it could just be your guest. It could just be and a lot of times it is. You don't know. Yeah, when people say, "Man, you're making a huge impact," for me, I can't put my mind register it, but I just have to take the words and say thank you. But I do know that when it comes down to from an individual conversation, I say, I think they've learned something about themselves today, and I've learned something about myself today, and that's where it starts.
And I can't agree with you more because there's times that I'm talking to an individual, whether it's in a meeting, a phone call, or hosting conversations like this, where I learned something, like you said earlier, one of the stories you shared, you were like, I've never talked about this before. And I'm like, not only is it so rewarding to know that someone feels comfortable enough to share those moments in the conversation, but sharing that and being comfortable and to your point, owning that story can make such an impact. And so, yeah, when people come up to me, they're like, was that your goal? Or, like this or that, or like, that's going to help so many people. I'm like, I don't, thank you, but I don't know how it's going to, where it's going to, how that person is showing up listening in that space. But I'm glad it can change someone just a little bit. And I got to learn something about the guest, hear their perspective. And there's been many times where something gets said here, and I'm like, I gotta like look into this more or take that perspective and like I wanna expand on that. I never thought about this. And like challenges me to grow as an individual just by sitting in the room.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you gotta be present. That's the biggest thing. There's always times where like the old habit self will want to talk you out of like being done doing something great, and for me, it's like you got to keep showing up. Okay, you had a rough beginning of this year. You got to keep showing up. You gotta keep on making the next right decision is always what I hear all the time is make the next right decision, make the next right move. And the opportunity to say yes to share my story is so important. And even getting to know that I can. is a huge milestone as well. You know, it's like going, wow, I did it. I could do it. I can do it. And not only that, but again, some would say, hey man, you do pretty good, you know. So if I'm willing, if that's the case. But I'm blessed to be fortunate enough to that God's given me that internal strength to do that. Not only that, I will say this. I will say the people that intervened in my life when the times were when I was incarcerated, or when in those dark moments when they intervened, and there were several people that try to have some intercession in my life so that I would be redirected. Now I remember every single word, every single thing they said, and it's like, okay, man, they were those people. I got to give them credit, all the credit too, so because they were part of my pulling me out of the abyss that I was in, for sure.
And it's one of those things too, and we'll end with this is like in that moment when you're in the thick of it, to the point you just mentioned, you don't realize how that might affect you today or down the road. It's like the right person comes along, says something, or is trying to give you that helping hand. And five people before them could have done it. And it was just that one person and that moment and everything where it's like you take it, but it could be years before you go, that changed my life.
Yeah.
That moment in time really pivoted my direction, and all these other things then were able to come into play because of that. Eric, how can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you?
I say through Prime Pitch podcast.com, or you can call me. I always put my number out there, 214-923-0923. If you ever need some advice, or you need some, you're having a rough spot, a rough patch in life, or you just want some advice and consulting regarding podcasting, just reach out to me directly, 214-923-0923.
Well, thank you, Eric, for all of your insight today. It was very impactful.
Well, thank you, Olivia. It's a pleasure to know you, and it's a pleasure to be on your podcast. Thank you for giving me some time to share. They say time equals value, and I valued so much of this time with you today.
I personally found it so rewarding and so valuable. And again, thank you for showing up, giving vulnerability, giving transparency, and owning your story. And
Amen.
that being said, I a few of our key takeaways from today's conversation include having coping mechanisms in place. As Eric mentioned earlier in telling his journey from childhood, and then being active in the military, to veteran, to the struggles he went through after that, he didn't have the right coping mechanisms always in place, and building those out are so important. Whether it's dealing with something today in your past, we have to acknowledge the things we have to cope with as well. Is be And this is one of my favorite things Eric said today, is be the humble badass. Like, it's okay to be humble about it, but show up and be that badass. And it's probably better to be a little humble about it too. So like I keep that in there. Um as well as toughness is not silence. And I think so many of us, no matter where we are in our life or what we're going through, in moments of feeling like we need help or, struggle in any form, we don't use our voice in asking for help or asking for direction. You go, I could get through it. I could do it. It's fine, right? That's a big one. People go, I'm doing fine. But toughness does not mean silence. As Eric mentioned earlier and demonstrated through the different stories he shared with us today, is sometimes when we think we're being tough, and we're just silent, and we got it all, we can put all the weight on our shoulders, are the moments that you need to be reaching out for help, you need to be communicating with others, as well as you don't know what you don't know, and own those things. As Eric mentioned earlier, continue to grow, continue to strive, continue to learn things, but understand there are things we don't know. We might look back at them later on and go, ah, that was the light bulb moment. Or now I have the tools in my toolbox to go do X, Y, and Z, as well as learn, grow, and transform. And lastly, own your story. Sometimes, as Eric mentioned earlier, it we feel that our story shouldn't be told, or we don't have the right place to tell our story, so we shouldn't share some of those moments that have shaped us. But owning your story and being the individual that tells your path and being able to show how you walked through it and got through that and the tools you have gained through it can be so powerful, but it's also there's strength in being able to own your story and not hide behind your story. This was a great episode with our top notch guest, Eric Rush. Thank you for listening and have a successful day.